Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Land and Home Show. Today we are talking about how to read topographical maps. Hey, I'm Stephen J.B. Davis, your land specialist and residential realtor here in Central Kentucky and beyond. And we are standing in my home office because there's no need to be outside for this particular video to talk a little bit about topographical maps and how to read them and why they are useful, whether you are a current landowner or you'd like to be a landowner. Maps are a part of my daily job, especially with buyers, with people looking to buy land. I make maps on a daily basis, and you can't really go too far in the 21st century without seeing some type of map because we've all got them on our phones, whether it's Apple Maps or Google or Waze. Generally, most people in first world society use maps to try to get from point A to point B. And so with that said, most maps, or at least the way that we typically use them, are kind of a two-dimensional thing. So distances between places, whether you're going north, south, east, west. But today we're talking about topographical maps because we're adding that third dimension of how high up you are, how low down you are, and that's really what a topographical map does. Now you may hear topographical map, you may hear topo map, you may hear contour map. It all means the same thing, and they all deliver the same information. That information being where you are from an up and down standpoint, from an altitude standpoint, how high above sea level you are. And before we get into how to read them, I just want to give like a brief little history. Okay, so if we go back to 1884, there was a gentleman named John Wesley Porter. I cannot remember exactly what he did. Maybe he was a cartographer. Cartography is just the study of maps. But in any case, he petitioned the USGS, which is the United States Geological Survey, to authorize basically the spending of money in order to create a topographical map system for the United States. I'm sure that other people had tried to create topographical maps before then, but it had never really been sort of formalized and made into a project where we might be able to access all of these maps in a database or in a library or something like that. So John Wesley Porter is to thank for that back in 1884. And obviously since then, technology has changed immensely. So, the first topographical maps look much different and were calculated much different than they are today. So there have been many iterations of how these maps come to be. But by 1970 is when we really started to switch as a country and probably as an international scientific community, I would imagine, to much more of a digitally focused manner of creating these maps, recording them, storing them, that type of thing. So 1970s, that's when, the first computers have been around and all sorts of digital things are happening, and topographical maps are a part of that. Today, in the 21st century, we have things called, GIS data, and we have a lot of data in order to tell us where things are as they relate to each other, to be able to scale things down so that we can see them on a tiny screen, even though the world is much bigger than our screens, and to store that information, to make it available digitally, and then, of course, to update it because things change. People build things on land and natural disasters happen and waters, they flood and they recede. So today topographical maps are updated about every 3 years as far as the United States is concerned. I can't speak for the rest of the world. So that's kind of the quick history, but if you are much more interested in learning more about it, you can look in the description of this video, and there are 2 links that will just kind of go through the last 125, 135 years of topography here in the United States. Okay, so here is the how-to. We have an imaginary piece of land here that I've named Black Locust Farm, and I just want to take you through the basics of a map, number one, and then the basics of topographical map reading. So first, on any map, you're going to want to look at your legend. Sometimes they're called keys, but it's going to be in some corner or side of the map. And in our legend, as with all, there's always going to be a cardinal direction, like which way is north. And that's why there's this triangle that I have crudely drawn with an N that represents north. So up is north, that means that south is down, left is west, and oh, there's my phone. And right is east. Let me turn this off really quick. All right, so continuing on. Inside of our legend, there are some things that for our purposes on this map, we have some information. So not all maps are the same. They're not going to all include the same thing, but this is what our map includes. So the first thing in our legend is the dotted red line, and that's the farm road. So getting onto the property and getting through the property. There's a road that I've drawn. Next is the main road, the two lines with the X's. So this is the road that the whole property is on. The black line is the parcel boundary. So literally, like what is the shape of the parcel of land? It's this whole black shape that I've drawn. This orange square right there in our legend here is the barn. The creek, blue almost always. I have never seen an official map where blue has not represented water. But you can almost always count on blue being water of some sort, whether it's a creek, a pond, an ocean, a lake. Blue is for water. And so our blue line is a creek. This pentagon, this orange pentagon, is a house. So there's our house right here where my finger was just circling. And then this blue circle with a W is a well. So then that leaves us with all of these brown lines, right? And if you look at old topographical maps that are made out of paper, the lines they can be black, they can be yellow, they can be lots of different colors. On digital ones, especially with the mapping program that I use, topographical lines are always yellow. You may hear them called contour lines or contour maps. You may hear it called Topo Map, which is just a diminutive, a short word for topographical. So you may hear it topo lines or Topo Map, and then you may hear topographical map or topographical lines. They are all interchangeable. They all mean the same thing and convey the same information. So with our topographical lines, we have a lot going on. I just took a marker and started drawing stuff. So the one thing to know is that these numbers they're not real. They're just for demonstrative purposes. I did not do any sort of mathematical type of figuring in order to get all this stuff. So this is all imaginary numbers, but in principle, it is the way that topographical lines and maps work. So the number one rule is to understand that when lines are far apart on a topographical map, that indicates a gentler slope. So when they're wide, it means that things are less steep. When lines are really close together, it means that things are more steep. So thin space, very steep or more steep in relationship to other lines, and thick spaces mean less steep relative to other lines. And the reason why I say relative is because not all spaces between thick or thin lines are universal on all topographical maps. Whereas in this general area of the land, there are, I don't know how well this is showing on camera, but like this line where my finger is at 1,320 feet above sea level. The next line below, so we're moving downhill, is 20 feet less than that. So 1,300 feet above sea level, then 1,280, then 1,260, 1,240, 1,220, 1,200. So that's increments of 20 feet per one of these lines. However, depending on where you are or what equipment was being used to measure that map, these could all be 100 feet apart. So it's important to find the numbers of the topographical line. They won't always be stacked up like this. Like you may find this line has a number here and then you may have to trace the next line below it somewhere onto another parcel. You probably can't even see my finger before you find where that line is measured. So not all of these lines in terms of literal measurements, it's not a universal system of increments. The increments may change from map to map, just like 1 inch may equal 100 miles on one map, whereas a half an inch may equal 100 miles on a different map. Topographical lines work very similarly that way. So paying attention to increments is huge. And when you are using an electronic map, you should be able to zoom in enough in order to find the actual numbers so that you know what you're doing, how you are traversing space up and down. And then if you're really into grade, like, is it a 2% grade, a 6% grade, that kind of stuff. I don't do any of those calculations in my head. I just use an app and plug in the distance between two spaces, the height of where those 2 points are, and let a computer or a calculator kind of figure that out for me. I don't do that by hand, especially when I'm on the move. So thick lines mean less steep. Really thin lines close together mean more steep. The last thing that you want to be aware of outside of thickness and thinness, and then your increments of each of the lines, is just to know that water is always going to flow downhill. It will make its way down somehow. Sometimes it's not above ground. It can be underground and moving that way, but water will always move downhill. Therefore, if you are looking for running water and you want, you want to have the ability for animals or some sort of game that you're hunting to have a water source, it'll probably behoove you, if you don't have some sort of pond sitting somewhere, to find land that has some topographical diversity. Because if there's any kind of downhill, you're going to increase your chances that water is going to pool somewhere. The other thing about Kentucky is we have like the most contiguous water running like in the whole country. So like between our creeks, streams, and rivers, if you put them all together end to end, it's like more miles than any other state or something like that. I might be getting that slightly wrong, but that's why this information is important. It's important because if you know what these lines mean, you can then figure out, how that integrates into your ultimate vision of the land that you want to have, or the food plot you want to make, or the whatever else it is you're trying to do. I think that just about covers it. Those are the three main things: thick lines, less of a slope; thin lines, steeper slope. Pay attention to your numbers, because that's going to tell you, like if you've got a point here and a point here, you can measure the distance, and then if you know that this is at 1320 and this is at 1040, you can figure out the grade by using like a grade calculator in order to figure out, how steep is this really? Like, when you push up on a treadmill, like you can increase the grade or decrease the grade. That's what grade means. And you can use a grade calculator once you have the height of a point and the height of another point and the distance between them. Boom, you can figure out your grade. So pay attention to your numbers. And then lastly is just that interactive map. It is in the description of this video, so you can zoom in and play around with it and kind of figure out, different things that you want to figure out on a topographical map and just practice using it. If you have any other questions or something doesn't make sense, just let me know. All my contact information is in the description of this video as well, along with the history of how we have evolved through, topographical maps in the US. For now, that's all. Looking forward to the rest of the year. Stick with me here. We got lots of exciting things. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.